Imagine this. My own brother abandoned my 7-year-old son alone at a Greyhound bus station just to teach me a lesson, all because I refused to put him as co-owner of the family ice cream parlor. And when I called the police, my parents sided with him and called me the ungrateful one. Hi everyone, I'm April, a 32-year-old single mom running an ice cream parlor in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, the place my late husband Vance and I built from nothing. This happened earlier this summer, starting with a phone call I got right in the middle of a crazy Sunday rush. I was slammed behind the counter scooping cones non-stop for tourists when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Something told me to pick up. A calm but serious male voice asked, "Is this April?" "This is Officer Ramirez with Myrtle Beach Police Department." My stomach dropped instantly. He continued, "We have a little boy here about 7 years old who says his name is River and that you're his mom." My hands started shaking. River. At the police station, the officer explained that a bus station employee found him alone at the Greyhound terminal downtown around noon. Someone dropped him off, claimed he was lost, then left immediately. River had been crying, trying to remember my number, but kept getting it wrong. They had to try several before reaching me. I don't even remember ending the call. I just grabbed my keys, told my staff to lock up, and sped to the station. When I burst through the door, there he was, my little boy, curled up on a plastic chair in the corner, feet dangling, clutching the stuffed bear Vance gave him before he passed. His eyes were swollen cheeks streaked with tears, looking so small and terrified. Before I dive into what really happened that day, thank you for choosing to listen. If this story hits you the way it still hits me, please hit that like button. It really helps, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. I promise it gets intense. The second I saw River sitting there in that oversized jacket, my heart shattered. I dropped to my knees right on the police station floor and pulled him into my arms. He was trembling hard, his little body ice cold from the air conditioning and pure fear. He buried his face in my shoulder and started sobbing again, those deep, choking sobs that break a mom in half. I held him tight, rocking him like I did when he was a baby, whispering over and over, "Mommy's here now, baby. You're safe. I've got you." It took minutes before his crying slowed enough for him to breathe normally. A female officer came over, gave me a sad smile, and quietly explained what they knew so far. A passenger at the Greyhound terminal had noticed River standing alone near the benches, crying and calling for his mommy. When no adult came forward, they alerted a station employee. The employee wrapped him in a spare uniform jacket they had and brought him straight here. River had tried to give them my phone number, but he was so panicked he mixed up the digits a few times. They finally got through to me after several attempts. Hearing that my 7-year-old alone in a busy bus station, scared out of his mind, struggling to remember my number, it hit me like a punch. How terrified he must have been, watching strangers rush by, not knowing if anyone would help. And all I could think was, I let this happen. I trusted Tyson with my son that morning. River finally lifted his head, his face blotchy and wet. In this tiny, broken voice, he whispered, "Uncle Tyson." "He left me there, Mommy. He said to wait, and then he just drove away." Those words sliced through me. I hugged him closer, trying to keep my own tears from falling on him. I thanked the officers, signed some forms, and carried River to the car. He wouldn't let go of my neck the whole way home, legs wrapped around my waist like he thought I might vanish too. Once we were inside, I tried warm milk with a little honey, something that always calmed him after nightmares. He managed a few sips before shaking his head and curling up on the couch. I covered him with his favorite blanket, the one with the sailboats Vance picked out years ago. Within minutes, he was out, exhausted from the trauma. But even asleep, his fingers stayed twisted in my shirt, holding on for dear life. While he slept, I grabbed my phone and called Tyson. Straight to voicemail. Again and again. 10 calls, 15 nothing. My anger was building hot and sharp, but underneath it was this gnawing guilt eating me alive. How could I have handed River over so easily that morning? Tyson was my little brother. Family. I thought blood meant something. I thought I was helping him by letting him take the boys out so I could handle the rush at the parlor. Finally, my phone buzzed with a text from him. I opened it expecting an emergency explanation, maybe an apology. Instead, Beckett and I are grabbing burgers down by the boardwalk. We'll be home later. That was it. No mention of River, no panic, no urgency, like he'd simply forgotten my son existed. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. He was out enjoying a casual meal while River had been abandoned in a strange place, terrified and alone. The casual tone of that message, it made my blood boil in a way I'd never felt before. One of the officers had pulled me aside before we left the station. She'd spoken gently but firmly. "Ma'am, what happened today qualifies as child abandonment under South Carolina law. I strongly recommend you file an official report. We can start the process whenever you're ready." At the time, I'd nodded numbly too, focused on getting River home. But now, sitting in the dim living room listening to his soft breathing, her words echoed. I looked at my sleeping boy, so small, so trusting, and the guilt twisted harder. I'd let my brother into our lives because I wanted to believe in family. I'd ignored the little warning signs because I didn't want to think the worst of him. And today, my son paid the price. The house felt too quiet. I didn't turn on any lights. I just sat there on the floor beside the couch, one hand on River's back so he'd feel me if he stirred. My mind raced between fury at Tyson and this crushing self-blame. How had I been so blind? How had I put my child in danger just to keep the peace hours ticked by? The sun dipped low outside, casting long shadows through the windows. I kept checking the driveway, waiting for Tyson's car, rehearsing in my head what I'd say when he walked through that door, acting like nothing had happened. I wasn't sure what would come out first, the scream or the tears. All I knew was everything had changed in one afternoon, and there was no going back. Looking back, it all began about 10 months ago with that desperate late-night call from Tyson. It was around 11 on a weeknight, and I was finally winding down after closing the parlor. River was already asleep. My phone rang with Tyson's name on the screen. When I answered, all I heard at first was sobbing, deep, broken sobs, like I hadn't heard from him since we were kids. Between gasps, he managed to get it out. His wife had packed up and left that afternoon, taking most of their savings with her. He'd lost his job a couple weeks earlier, some layoffs at the construction firm, and now the landlord was threatening eviction because rent was overdue. He sounded completely lost, like the ground had disappeared under him. Tyson was always the baby of the family, the one our parents spoiled a little extra because he was the boy they'd waited years for. Growing up, I'd looked out for him the way big sisters do. Even after Vance passed and life got harder, that protective instinct never went away. Hearing him like that, I didn't hesitate. "Come stay with us," I told him. "You and Beckett. We've got room, and you need to be around family right now." He tried to protest at first, pride, I guess, but within days they showed up with suitcases and a couple of boxes. Beckett was 8 then, this energetic kid with a big grin who took to River immediately. The first few months honestly felt like a gift. Having them in the house brought noise and life back into our quiet routine. The boys spent hours on the beach behind the parlor building sandcastles, chasing waves, collecting shells. River, who'd been so withdrawn since losing his dad, barely talking some days, just staring out at the ocean, started opening up again. He'd come home covered in sand, laughing about how Beckett dared him to jump waves or race to the pier. Those laughs were music to me. For the first time in years, the house felt full in a good way. Tyson stepped up too, at least in the beginning. He'd cook dinner most nights, simple stuff like burgers on the grill or pasta with whatever was in the fridge. He'd handle school drop-offs and pickups when I had early openings at the parlor. He kept saying he was sending out resumes, that he'd land something soon and start contributing more, especially once tourist season picked up and the parlor got busier. We'd sit on the porch after the kids were in bed, sharing a couple beers while the ocean breeze rolled in. He talked a lot about getting back on his feet, making things right for Beckett. I believed him. I wanted to believe family could heal family, but even then there were small things I noticed and brushed off. Tyson would crack open beers earlier and earlier as the evenings wore on, sometimes finishing a six-pack by himself. He'd get this loose, loud laugh that felt a little forced. A few times when the boys were playing, I'd hear him call out, "Come on, Beckett's tougher than that show River, how it's done." It was playful on the surface, but it started making River pull back a bit during their games. And once or twice after a few drinks, he'd make offhand comments about Vance. Like one night he said, "Man, Vance checked out early and left you the whole business, huh? Some guys have all the luck even when they're gone." He laughed it off as a joke, but it landed wrong. I told myself he was hurting bitter about his own marriage falling apart and didn't mean anything by it. I chalked it all up to stress. Divorce is brutal. Losing a job on top of that would mess anyone up. He was my little brother and he needed time to heal. Besides, seeing River happy again made it worth any small friction. Family sticks together through the rough patches, that's what I kept telling myself. Those early months felt like we were rebuilding something broken piece by piece. The house was louder, messier, but warmer. I thought we'd turned a corner, that giving Tyson and Beckett a safe place would help everyone move forward. But around the 5th month, things started shifting in ways I didn't want to admit. The job search excuses piled up. I'd mention openings at the parlor, cashier shifts, helping with inventory during peak season, and Tyson would brush them off. Not the right fit, he'd say, or I'm waiting on something better. Weeks turned into months and his laptop stayed closed more often than not. He spent days scrolling on his phone or taking Beckett to the arcade while I handled everything at the parlor alone. The complaints started small. One evening, he walked into the kitchen and sighed loudly about how Beckett's room was cramped compared to the one River had. "It's not fair to the older kid," he muttered. I offered to swap furniture or add storage, but he waved it off. Then came the money gripes. He'd ask for extra cash for gas or kid stuff, and when I suggested he chip in once he had income, his face would tighten. The favoritism toward Beckett got impossible to ignore. Every little argument between the boys who got the last scoop of ice cream or whose turn it was on the gaming console, Tyson sided with his son instantly. "Beckett's bigger. He needs more," he'd say, or River should learn to share better. River started hanging back during playtime, choosing to read alone in his room instead of joining them. That quiet withdrawal hurt to watch, reminding me too much of how he'd been right after Vance died. The digs at Vance grew sharper too. Tyson would make comments in passing like how lucky I was to inherit the parlor outright, no partners to split profits with. Or he'd joke about how Vance left me set for life while he was scraping by. They weren't outright attacks, but the resentment underneath was clear. I'd change the subject, telling myself it was jealousy talking, that he'd get over it once he found steady work. Then came the real push. One night after the boys were asleep, Tyson sat me down at the kitchen table with this serious look. He leaned forward and said he'd been thinking about his future, about providing stability for Beckett. Putting my name on the parlor deed as co-owner would help me qualify for a business loan, he explained. Banks see joint ownership as lower risk. I could expand my options, maybe start something on the side. I was stunned, but tried to stay calm. I asked why he thought that made sense when the parlor was built from scratch by Vance and me, paid for with our savings. He shrugged and said he'd been contributing plenty, watching River after school, handling groceries, sometimes keeping the yard tidy. "I'm part of this family operation now," he pressed. "It's only fair to formalize it." When I said no, that the business was my and River's security and I couldn't risk it, his expression changed. The easygoing brother vanished, replaced by this cold stare. "You're holding everything tight like it's still just you and Vance," he snapped. "But we live here too. Beckett and I deserve some security." The argument ended with him storming off to his room. After that, conversations turned short and clipped. He'd avoid eye contact in the mornings, answer in one-word texts if I asked about his plans. But he didn't leave. Rent-free, living, free meals, no bills. It was too convenient to walk away from even as he sulked. The house atmosphere thickened. Meals were quiet, the boys sensing the tension and playing separately more often. River's chatter faded again. He'd pick at his food and ask to be excused early. I caught him staring out windows the way he used to, lost in his thoughts. My once lively home felt strained, like everyone was walking on eggshells. Tyson's entitlement kept showing in little ways. He'd use parlor supplies for personal stuff, taking inventory home, without asking, helping himself to cash from the tip jar for gas. When I called him on it, he'd act offended, claiming it was trivial compared to what he put up with living under my roof. Deep down, I knew his demands stemmed from more than money. The divorce had crushed his confidence, left him feeling like a failure next to what Vance and I had built. The parlor represented success he hadn't achieved, and sharing it would ease that sting. But understanding didn't make it right. I'd worked through grief to keep the business running for River's future. Handing over partial ownership felt like erasing everything Vance and I sacrificed for. Still kicking him out meant splitting the boys, disrupting River's fragile progress. So I tolerated the growing resentment, hoping Tyson would snap out of it, find work, and things would balance again. Instead, the divide widened, and that undercurrent of bitterness quietly poisoned everything. That Sunday morning felt like any other busy summer day at the parlor. Tourists were already lining up when I unlocked the doors at 9 families in flip-flops and beach cover-ups, craving cold treats after a hot night. The line stayed steady all morning, waffle cones, sundaes, milkshakes flying out faster than I could keep up. My 2 part-time staffers were scooping alongside me, but it was non-stop. Around 10, Tyson wandered into the back room where I was restocking sprinkles. He leaned against the doorframe, coffee in hand, watching the chaos through the service window. "Looks brutal out there," he said. "Why don't I take the boys to the water park down by the boardwalk? Give you some breathing room to handle this crowd." I hesitated for a second, the tension from our recent argument still fresh. But the parlor was slammed, and the boys had been asking to go for weeks. Beckett was bouncing at his dad's side, eyes bright with excitement, and River peeked in behind them, hopeful. Keeping the peace felt easier than starting another fight, especially on a day when I needed focus. "Okay," I said, wiping my hands on my apron. "Just have them back by dinner." They left with towels and sunscreen waving as they headed out. I turned back to the counter, grateful for one less thing to juggle. The rush didn't let up. Hours blurred into a rhythm of orders, smiles, and sticky counters. Around noon, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I stepped into the walk-in freezer for a quick break and saw the unknown number. When I answered, Officer Ramirez introduced himself again, the same calm voice from before, but tighter this time. He didn't waste words. River had been found alone at the Greyhound station downtown. No adult with him. They had him safe at the station now. My knees buckled. I gripped a shelf of ice cream tubs to stay upright, the cold air burning my lungs as everything spun. I shouted to my staff that I had an emergency, grabbed my keys, and ran. The drive was a haze of red lights and honking my mind, screaming questions I couldn't answer. By evening, the parlor was closed and the house was quiet except for the boys upstairs playing video games. I heard Tyson's car pull indoors, slamming Beckett's laughter as they came through the front door carrying fast food bags. Tyson was chatting about some funny splash at the park, acting like it had been a perfect day out. I waited until the boys were settled in Beckett's room with their nuggets and fries. Then I met Tyson in the kitchen, closing the door behind me. My voice came out low but shaking. "Where did you leave River today?" He froze for a split second, burger wrapper in hand, then tried an innocent look. "What are you talking about?" "The boys were with me the whole time." "Don't lie to me," I said, stepping closer. "The police called. River was found alone at the bus station." "What did you do?" His face shifted, defensiveness first, then something colder. He set the bag down hard. "Fine, I dropped him off there for a bit. Thought it might make you realize how much you need me around, how much I do for this family. You won't even put my name on the business that I help keep running." I stared at him, disbelief turning to rage. You abandoned my 7-year-old son in a bus station to prove a point about the parlor. He smirked, no remorse in it. Just a scare. I knew someone would find him quick. You'd get the message that Beckett and I deserve more than handouts. The words hung there, ugly and calculated. All the resentment he'd been building had led to this, using my child as leverage. I thought of River's terrified face at the station, his broken whispers. Then I remembered the officer's advice hours earlier: file the report. My hand trembled as I pulled out my phone. Tyson's eyes widened. You're not seriously, I am. I dialed 911, voice steady now. The operator answered and I gave the address explaining child abandonment by a family member. Tyson lunged for the phone, but I stepped back, keeping my eyes locked on him until I hung up. He started yelling how I was betraying blood, overreacting, ruining everything. The boys' game paused upstairs. I heard footsteps on the landing, but they stayed put. Less than 2 hours later, headlights swept the driveway. Mom and Dad burst through the door, faces flushed from the drive inland. Mom went straight to Tyson, wrapping him in a hug while he played the victim, voice cracking as he recounted his version. Dad stood beside them, arms crossed, looking at me with disappointment. How could you call the police on your own brother? Mom said, tears in her eyes. Family solves things privately. You're breaking us apart over something he didn't even mean to hurt anyone with. Dad nodded. He's your little brother, April. Blood doesn't turn its back like this. I stood there, numb and furious, as they comforted Tyson on the couch. The room felt thick with accusation, all of it aimed at me for protecting my son. Outside, red and blue lights began flashing through the windows and the first siren cut through the night. Less than 20 minutes after the call, my parents' car screeched into the driveway. The front door flew open before they even turned off the engine. Mom rushed in first, eyes already red from whatever version Tyson had fed her over the phone. She went straight to him on the couch, pulling him into her arms and rubbing his back in slow circles. It's okay, baby, she murmured. We're here now. Dad followed, face stern, and stood over me with that heavy silence he used when he was truly angry. He shook his head slowly. Calling the police on your own brother? After everything he's been through, this isn't how we handle family, April. Tyson leaned into Mom, playing it up with a few sniffles, muttering about how he'd only meant to scare me a little, that it got out of hand. The room filled with their murmurs of comfort for him, like I was the one who'd shattered everything. I stood apart, arms wrapped around myself, biting back everything I wanted to scream. River was upstairs, probably confused and scared, hearing the raised voices. Beckett sat curled in the corner of the sectional, the whole time, knees drawn up, unusually quiet even for him. Then it started, a small tremble in his shoulders. He glanced at Tyson, then at Mom, eyes filling fast. A tear slipped down his cheek, then another. He wiped them away hard with the back of his hand, but they kept coming. Mom noticed first. She loosened her hold on Tyson and turned toward him. Sweetie, what's wrong? Beckett's voice came out shaky, barely above a whisper. Dad's lying. The room went dead still. Tyson sat up straighter, eyes narrowing. Beckett, stay out of this. Go upstairs. But Beckett shook his head, more tears spilling. He looked straight at Mom, then Dad, like he was searching for something safe. His words tumbled out, halting, broken by hiccups. We didn't go to the water park the whole time. Dad drove to the bus station downtown. He told me to stay in the car and wait. Then he took River inside. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad's posture stiffened. Beckett swallowed hard, voice cracking. I watched from the window. Dad came back out alone. River ran after him, crying, yelling for him to wait. But Dad stopped, looked down at River, and said, You're holding your mom back. She'd be better off without you. Then he got in the car and we drove away. River was just standing there, all alone. Silence crushed the room. Mom's arms dropped from Tyson completely, her face drained of color, hands trembling visibly at her sides. She stared at her youngest son like she didn't know him. Dad's jaw clenched. He took one step back, eyes fixed on Tyson. When he spoke, his voice was low and ice cold. Something I'd never heard aimed at either of us kids. "I don't even recognize you anymore." Tyson opened his mouth, face twisting in panic. He's confused. He's just a kid, he doesn't. But blue and red lights were already flooding the windows. Two officers knocked firmly and stepped inside when I opened the door. They asked everyone to stay calm, then started taking statements first from me, then turning to the others. When they sat down with Beckett, he repeated it all again, clearer this time, despite the tears. The officers listened carefully, nodding, jotting notes. One of them placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and thanked him for being brave. Tyson sat frozen as they read him his rights. No outburst, no pleas, just this blank, defeated look as they cuffed him and led him out. He didn't glance back at any of us, not even Beckett. The front door closed behind them. Beckett slipped off the couch and walked to the window, pressing his forehead against the glass. He watched the patrol car pull away, lights fading down the street until it disappeared. Then the sobs came, deep, uncontrollable waves that shook his whole body. Mom and Dad stood there, lost the weight of what their grandson had revealed, hanging over everything. 8 months later, nothing feels the same anymore. The court process wrapped up quicker than I expected. Tyson pleaded to a misdemeanor child endangerment charge. He got 24 months of probation, mandatory parenting classes every week, and a court order limiting his visits with Beckett to supervised sessions only 1 hour every other week at a family services center with a social worker present the whole time. Beckett moved in permanently with Mom and Dad at their place inland. It broke my heart watching him pack his things, but he seemed relieved in a quiet way. The constant tension at our house had worn on him too. Mom and Dad doted on him, giving him the stability he needed after everything. For me, the parlor became impossible to hold on to. I tried at first, threw myself into work, longer hours, new flavors, anything to keep busy. But every corner held ghosts. The counter where Tyson used to lean and complain. The back booth where he'd sit scrolling his phone while I closed up alone. Customers who'd known us for years would ask innocently, "How's your brother doing these days?" Or, "Where's that cute nephew of yours?" Each question felt like salt in a wound that wouldn't close. Some nights I'd stand in the empty shop after locking up, lights off, listening to the hum of the freezers, and the memories would flood back, good ones with Vance mixed with the bad ones from that last year. I'd break down right there on the floor, wondering if selling meant letting go of the last piece of him. It took months of back and forth before I admitted I couldn't breathe in that space anymore. I listed the parlor in the fall. It sold faster than I thought, a young couple with big dreams just like Vance and I once had. Closing day was bittersweet. I handed over the keys, walked out for the last time, and didn't look back. River and I packed up and headed to Seattle. A fresh start in a new city, new schools, new routines. I found remote bookkeeping work that let me be home more, and we rented a small house with a yard big enough for him to run around. River sees a child therapist every week. The nightmares came often, at first waking up crying, asking if Uncle Tyson was coming to take him away again. But slowly, session by session, he's opening up. He laughs more now, real belly laughs when we build forts or bake cookies. He's making friends at his new school, talking about soccer tryouts. Some days he still asks about Beckett or wonders out loud why Uncle Tyson did what he did. Those questions hurt, but we talk through them honestly in ways a 7-year-old can understand. As for Tyson, I cut him off completely. Blocked his number, deleted social media connections, changed email filters. If he tried reaching out through Mom or Dad, I asked them not to pass messages. It wasn't easy. Guilt crept in sometimes, old habits of protecting my little brother. But every time I wavered, I pictured River alone at that bus station, and the choice became clear. Family isn't just shared blood. It's the people who shield you, who put your safety first, no matter what. Tyson crossed a line no relative should cross, using my child as a pawn in his resentment. Setting that hard boundary wasn't cruel, it was the only way to protect River and give us both a chance to heal. These days, when I watch River chase seagulls on a Puget Sound beach, or fall asleep with his new stuffed orca clutched tight, I know we made the right call. The pain from that Sunday lingers, but it's fading into something we can carry without it weighing us down. We're building a life that's ours alone, safe and full of possibility. And if there's one thing I've learned through all this, it's that loving your child sometimes means choosing them over everyone else, even the people you once thought you couldn't live without.